Hello friends, in this video I'm gonna take you through our journey of making this Darkshire horror game in Unreal Engine 5. It took us about 3 weeks, and I'm saying we because I streamed the whole process start to finish. It's all on twitch.tv/anboniwow in my VODs. I don't know exactly how long Twitch is gonna keep the VODs, but if you guys want I can just save it into a different YouTube, maybe just the whole VODs completely. Also, since the game is now done, it is obviously completely free. The link to it is down in the video description. You can feel free to play the game. Let me know what you think about it. And I'm saying this because we're gonna go through the process of making it in this video, and obviously there's gonna be some spoilers. I'll try to avoid them as much as I can, but given the nature of the game, there will be some spoilers if you watch this. So the first thing we did, and the question I'm getting asked the most, is the level. How do you import the map from World of Warcraft to Unreal Engine? And this is what I've done for all of the other games I've made. I'm using this program called WoW Export Tools, where you can literally pick an area of the World of Warcraft map. You have the whole map, you just take it, you just yoink it, okay? So for this project, we wanted to do something a little creepy. This project was gonna be a multiplayer Among Us game in the beginning because that was a Savik's recommendation, but things changed and we decided to pivot into a single player mystery game instead, which was also a recommendation, but this time from Guzu. So we took the whole Darkshire map, we import that into Blender, and there it is, a big, ginormous map with 1,000 million models, a bunch of trees, and a bunch of problems. But this is very useful because not only do we get the models to use in our game, we also get the overall reference of the map. The reason why I can't just import everything, copy paste and call it a day is because doing that would import every single object individually and separately. So even if you have the same tree that looks the exact same, you have it 100 times in the scene, it's not gonna have just one object copied 100 times, it's gonna have 100 different objects. And a map like this has a bunch of small vases and cups and mugs and barrels and trees and bushes, so you would end up with 100 billion models, and that would make the game like 100 gigabytes. Not very good. So what we need to do is reduce the number of objects and make sure there's no duplicates. But first, we need a big reference of the map. So what I did was I combined all of the models into one and I exported that as a big object for the reference. Then I go in and one by one, I pick one of each. So I pick one chair, I pick one barrel, I pick one carpet, I pick one table, I pick one of each tree. This is a lengthy process. I also exported just the landscape itself because I wanted to use this as a base to move around on. So after importing everything into Unreal Engine, we now have a full map with all the trees, all the models, but obviously we need collision on all of these meshes, we need collision on all of these houses, so there was no escaping it. I had to export each model one by one. I'm getting PTSD looking back at this. This was definitely the lengthiest process. Now placing models one by one was gonna basically be a full-time job for a week. So meanwhile, I wanted to work on the actual landscape. We got this asset pack, very nice looking grass, so we applied that to a big flat landscape that we could walk on, because out of the box, as you can see, the terrain imported looks really sussy. And then I made the exact same mistake as I did in my first game I made, the Fortnite game. I tried to paint the landscape's peaks and valleys and mountains manually. Big mistake, do not do this. After spending about 30 minutes painting mountains essentially, I realized this is gonna take a long time and it looks terrible. So we went ahead and we looked up how to make a height map again, because I have the model right there, and in Blender you can actually make a height map, and what a height map does is it creates an image, and wherever the image is white or the brightest, that is the tallest peak, and wherever the image is black, that's the lowest valley. And you just take that picture, you apply it to your landscape, and it's all done for you. Our landscape was looking pretty decent. You know, obviously the grass was making it look really pretty. All these houses didn't exactly line up as they should have anymore, but we could just easily fix that. This is where you add a little bit of manual intervention. I also had to smooth out the landscape because when I imported it, it kind of made ramps be kind of like staircases. So I just had to smooth out the whole landscape. We could also just draw some pathways to kind of guide the player. And now that we had the landscape, it was time to just place the objects. I keep mentioning the objects. We had to place a lot of objects. And I did have a lot of models to choose from, but at least I had one of each and not 1,000 of each. Progress was definitely slow because I realized my map is actually huge. So I was making progress, I was putting all these objects down, but then walking around it still felt really empty. But I was hoping once I add the big trees and I make the light a little dimmer, it's gonna merge everything nicely. So I tried it out with the default sky just a little bit darker, and yeah, this definitely is on the right track. Still very empty, and the problem is you can see all the way in the distance, which whether this was gonna be like a single player scary game or an Among Us kind of game, it wouldn't really make sense to see all the way in the distance. Now, one thing we did different from the original World of Warcraft was we made this lamppost actually have some light around it, because I figured that would be nice since all the levels gonna be very dark. Maybe you have these lamps to illuminate the path. And we also decided to be a little fancy and have the light actually flicker a little bit, like it's a candle. It was working, but it was not a candle, it was the sun. So we were on the right track, but it's just a little too much. We made it a little dimmer and now it looked really good. And there we go, we had a really nice looking lamp. Then we added a much nicer looking sky with the full moon. This was a pack I bought for People Island long time ago, so it's using the same sky as that game. And this one looked a lot better. We're definitely on the right track. These lamps were looking great, but the level was still very empty. There's a lot of work to be done on the level. Next up, it was time for all these little objects in the houses, and there was more to it than just placing the objects. Every time you import a 3D mesh into Unreal Engine, the material looks really shiny. So for every single material, for every single object, I had to make the roughness maxed out and the specular level 0. Otherwise, it would just be very shiny. So I had to do this for every single object. And not just that, we also had to add collision. Now, one quick and dirty way of doing it would be to just use complex collision. But if you have this many objects with too much complex collision, your game's actually not going to run very well. So for these objects that don't really matter too much, I just put some very basic boxes as collision, because you're not going to really interact with them anyway. But it still took a long time to put everything in, change all the materials, change all the collision for every single thing. And after all this time and all these little objects placed, my levels still looked very empty. It felt like I made zero progress when you look from outside. So I decided it's finally time to add the trees, because I can't stand looking at this barren wasteland. So we got our first tree. That was our first tree. We planted it right there. And not only trees, but we also added a bunch of bushes. We added some fallen trees as well. And we also added a big volumetric fog. A couple of hundred trees later, and a couple of hundred bushes, and a nice looking volumetric fog with the brand new sky made the game look great. World of Warcraft assets with Unreal Engine 5 lighting. Apparently lighting is like 90% of the whole visuals, because this looks pretty good, I think. And we had the recommendation of making it a first person instead, and I believe this is when we kind of decided to shift away from making a multiplayer Among Us and go more into a single player, kind of a Slenderman style, where you'd have this big monster chase you around and it was going to be a big mystery game. And if you guys have played World of Warcraft, then you know who the monster is. The monster that plagues Darkshire and Duskwood in general. Of course, it had to be Stitches. Now for the monster, I did a lot of it off stream because I was following a Udemy course on AI. So I'm gonna show you in editor right now exactly what it is we did. First choice we had to make was which Stitches do we use. We have here the new version from retail, and then we have here the old version from classic. This is the brand new one, the retail version. Obviously he's a lot more high definition. All of his teeth are there. All of his organs, you can kind of see them and poke them. This chain looks a lot nicer. The old one looks just a little scuffed. His guts are just a texture. His chain is just a texture. His texture is really bad, but for some reason, I put them side by side, and the old one is just way scarier, I think. Maybe it's just an uncanny, strange look. Maybe it's the small eye. I don't know exactly, but this guy just looks dumb. I look at that and I think I'm gonna definitely die. I look at this and I think it's gonna give me a quest. And we ended up with this guy. This here is our monster. Big and scary. So here's how we made him work. In Unreal Engine, you have this thing called a behavior tree, and he's not super complicated. These are all his instructions, and he will pick a task to do based on a lot of things that are happening in the game. Again, I don't really want to go into the fine detail of how he actually functions. I mean, if you read these things right now, you can probably kind of figure it out, but he generally has some areas on the map that he will randomly patrol to. He will go from one point to the next. If he sees you nearby, he will start chasing the player. He becomes very fast, very angry, and if you enter his area of influence, this little sphere, then it's not good for you. However, he's not completely unshakable. I don't want to exactly tell you how he functions and how you can get rid of him. Yeah, I'm not gonna say that, but he's not very stupid. He actually does follow you. Even if you line of sight, he remembers the last spot he saw you in, and he will kind of figure out where you could have went from there. But there are ways, if you know exactly how he works, there are ways to kind of bamboozle him. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail there, but this is our monster, and we also made him, every time you advance in the level, and we're going to talk about that in a second, he becomes more intelligent and faster. So the more you progress through the game, the harder the game becomes, and close to the end of the game, if you manage to get all the way, it's really hard. Unless you know exactly what you're doing, it's I don't know, I haven't really seen anyone play it that has no idea what they're doing. It's gonna be interesting to see people play it for the first time. And speaking of progression, the way you progress through the game is you have to find these 7 secret demonic runes. So we made a new actor for the rune, we added a keybind E to interact, and the way we made interact work was exactly the same as I did for prop hunt. It would essentially create a line from the start point of your camera forward, and if the line intersects one of these objects, one of these runes, then we pick the rune up. And we also had a system that every time you pick up a rune, it would teleport the monster somewhere a little bit closer to you, because in case the AI just happened to be on the other side of the map, you might get to a point where you just wouldn't see him all game. So we made sure we kind of forced some interaction by every time you pick up a rune, it teleports him a little bit closer. Now I'm not going to show you exactly where these teleport places are in the map, but again, for me, that I made the game, so I know kind of exactly where he is at all times. Now I didn't want to just hide the runes and just have them set in the same spot every single game, so we wanted to randomize them a little bit for the replayability value, and in case you die, you start over, you don't exactly know where everything is, you gotta kind of search them again. So what we did was, every single rune that you have to find has a couple of predetermined spots, and every time you start a new game, each rune gets placed into one of these random spots, and good luck finding them. Now, similarly to the runes, you could just walk up to these pieces of paper and you could interact with them, and you could actually inspect them and rotate them around. And this is also a part that I didn't show on stream how I did it, because again, I used another Udemy course, but I can show you right now all the smoke and mirrors and everything that's actually happening behind the scenes. So each time you actually click a note, what happens is up here on this mountain, there's some little content. There's this camera with 3 light bulbs and a little object. Now this camera will project a view, and that view will be turned into a texture. This is the texture, and then from the texture we made a material. This is the material, and then that material we feed it into a widget. A widget is just a user interface thing, so it's this one, and basically it will update in real time based on what the camera is seeing. So every time you click a note, I tell this object here to become the object that you just clicked. So the camera will see actually this object, but this object will be the same as the one you clicked. And the rotating around works by takes the mouse position scaled by DPI, turns it into a vector 2D, calculates the mouse location, breaks the vector into an X and Y, and the X and the Y of the mouse coordinate becomes the rotation of the object. I don't know how I did that, but it works. And for the notes themselves, we asked ChatGPT to give us a bunch of high quality notes. So we made a bunch of notes and we scattered them around the level. Good luck finding them. I'm obviously not going to show you where they are, but they're not very hard to find. They do give you clues and fake clues as to where to find the actual runes and what to do with the runes once you get them. Next, I wanted to have a map system that also tracks the player's movement on the map. So this is what I did. I took a picture of the actual map I had from top to bottom, and you'd think it's easy. I have a 1K by 1K picture, I have this little square in the middle that is a separate image, and I can just simply take the X and Y coordinates of my player character, do a little bit of science, and move the little square based on the X and Y position on the grid. But the problem was the center of the map was not in the middle, it was actually a little offset. So I tried moving the whole world a little bit, but everything started breaking. I had a bunch of coordinates that wouldn't make sense anymore. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna offset the X and Y of the player by a certain amount and it's gonna make sense eventually. This little mathematical equation here took me like 2 hours. These little lines I made in Photoshop every 250 pixels to divide my map. I mapped them in Unreal Engine with these tall beams. So I would go next to one beam, I would press map and I'd make sure I'm kind of close to the middle, and then I would just go to the next one and see if it matches. And I went in number by number until it finally was kinda accurate. It's not perfectly accurate, but it's good enough. With the map being done, we also added this sprinting system. I thought in case the monster does get to you, the sprinting system might give you a chance to get away from it, maybe. And you have a little stamina bar on the bottom right, and it recharges over time. And with all of this being done, it was finally time to work on our actual player character. And there he is. I asked Index to provide me with I told him, give me a basic human farmer model and you pick whatever you want, that's what we're gonna use. And he came up with this completely naked, bald looking guy. You know what? It's perfect. We added a little animation package for him, slapped him in there, and we now had a functioning farmer peasante. Sometimes he was just doing this though. Easy fix though, we just reset and play again. We play again and everything was fine, except when you look up, he stares back at you. I wasn't sure if I actually want to keep this or not. It was kind of funny to just have him stare at you when you look all the way up, but this is a professional AAA game studio, so we had to fix that. In order to fix that, you need an animation offset to calculate the position of the camera, and whenever you're looking up, it also tilts his head back so you don't see that. So we did that and it worked great. And then it was time to work on this end game portal here. This is big spoilers, cover your eyes and close your ears if you haven't finished the game yet. But when you get the 7 runes, you have to bring them to this altar here, and whenever you actually do that, you spawn this portal, and the portal is gonna give you the weapon you need to defeat the final boss, Stitches. I really don't want to show you the ending of the game because I didn't even stream that. I want to keep it as a surprise for people who actually finish the game. And then the last thing we did was add the music and sound effects. Luckily, we have some actual professional composers in the chat, and Lucas came in clutch with some very nice tracks. And he also wanted nothing for credits except a little guitar here. So this guitar here on the graveyard, this is for him. This is our composer's graveyard, I guess. We added a background looping music with a bunch of special effects. There's a couple of songs actually that play in different times. I don't want to really spoil the sound too much. We added some footsteps to the player. We added some really good content to the abomination. We had he has some chains dragging around. I can actually drag one on the level right now and show you what he sounds like. I'm gonna add him right there. He's probably gonna kill me really fast, so I'll put him a little further away and I'll try not to die instantly. He's a little too he might see me. Here he comes. Alright, that is terrifying. Even now, that's terrifying. One last thing we did, the actual last thing, was we made a bunch of menus. Menus, I hate making menus. It's just so tedious, but we're professionals, so we have a mouse sensitivity slider, we have an FPS slider. I don't recommend you play 120 because all of this fog is actually not very good for you. 90 should be good enough. And we also have sound volume. We also have a main menu we did, very basic main menu. I think the fog makes it really atmospheric. The lighting in Unreal Engine 5 can make any asset look good, but WoW assets actually look pretty decent on their own. It's just the lighting in World of Warcraft is very flat. This is what it looks like in WoW. It's just flat, but if you add a little bit of juice, a little bit of realistic shadows, it just instantly makes it look 10 times better. And that's the game. It's obviously free because it's using a lot of WoW assets, and I made it as a tribute to the game. So I hope you guys enjoy, I hope you guys give it a shot, and good luck finding the 7 demonic runes and breaking the curse of Darkshire. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.